Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 10th of July 2024. A lot going on today in terms of NATO meeting. We've had a request from Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister for Ukraine, and indeed from Zelensky himself, for the US to change their restrictions on use of US provided weaponry into Russia. Here Max24 says during NATO summit there will be a discussion with the USA and allies about strikes into Russian territory. Quote, Ukraine is asking the US for permission to strike Russian military airfields with American long-range weapons, said Kuleba. And then here Null Reports says Ukraine needs the ability to attack Russian aircraft at air bases, and the US should lift all restrictions on Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory, according to Zelensky. He added that Patriot air defense systems will help, but that is not enough. Zelensky also warned that if the US leaves NATO, the world could lose Poland, the Baltics and other countries due to leaders like Putin. So this is ahead of a possible Trump presidency starting in November, or after the elections in November, starting January next year. That is a real worry for many around the world. NATO is apparently doing things to try and mitigate that. Ukraine clearly worried there. UK has, or Keir Starmer has been pretty strong. He's had a successful outing so far as a new Prime Minister, reiterating UK's staunch support for Ukraine, but also making statements about Ukraine's ability to use Storm Shadows as they see fit, although he does add with a defensive stance in mind. But yeah, not quite sure whether that is giving permission for Ukraine to fire Storm Shadows at, say, air bases hundreds of kilometers into Russia, although, as I mentioned in the video earlier today, that's possibly not the weapon you would use to do that anyway. But nonetheless, looking quite strong from that point of view. Now, with regard to the ability for Ukraine to strike into Russia, a lot of people are talking about this interview and getting up in arms about what Blinken says here. I think it's perhaps a little more nuanced than that, and I'll explain why in a second. I'm not trying to let Blinken off the hook at all here. I think the US are weak on this particular topic, but this is Blinken being interviewed by a Polish interviewer.
Nobody wants to see this war escalate, and so we as we always have, we want to look for ways to make sure that Ukraine can be successful, but we don't want to see this war escalate, because that wouldn't be good for not only the Ukrainian people, it wouldn't be good for the Polish people, it wouldn't be good for anybody. But obviously, look, nations certainly have expressed and have a right to express concerns over potential spillover here. I'll let the Polish government speak to its self-defense needs and its self-defense policies, but we don't want to see this war escalate. We don't want to see this become what Mr. Putin has claimed from the beginning that it has been, this attack by NATO, or the West versus Russia, or the United States versus Russia.
Would such actions be escalatory on the...
I think it would depend on the circumstances, and I mean, there has been, for instance, as you know, stray missiles that have gone into Polish airspace, and that's certainly of concern. Not all of those missiles have been Russian, so I mean, we'd have to look at the circumstances in particular.
Now, a lot of people are replaying that, retweeting that video and saying, "Oh, bloody anti-escalation," and etc., and applying that to strikes at Russian air bases. You've got to understand what that interview was. That was from a Polish person talking specifically about the Polish fighters flying over Ukraine, as far as I would understand this, and the Polish air defense system shooting down Russian missiles and drones inside Ukrainian airspace. Now, he does keep talking about escalation, so it does tell you that escalation is top of the agenda for the US administration, for the Biden administration. That is something they are always considering, right? We do not want escalation, says Trent Telenko, all quoting them. This is the White House's comment on the proposal to shoot down Russian missiles from Polish territory. It would not be good for either Ukrainians or Poles, White House spokesman for national security John Kirby told Polish radio. Now, although Trentselenko here has this in the right context, there are lots of other people who have just been taking this as a kind of general statement about escalation, and we don't want to be escalatory, etc., etc. This is just in that context concerning the Polish use of their own aircraft and air defences. That said, I think the US should have just been like, well, Poland need to do what they see fit, and just because I think if the problem is he's been directly asked about this, but I think you can answer that in such a way where you might still have worries about escalation in your head, but just as soon as you start clearly talking about these ideas, you are playing into the Russian hand, because the Russians then know that their redlining is having an effect on your thought processes. And this is a kind of thinking that Macron has been dead against. And it is a problem. It is a problem. But just let it be understood that this is in that much narrower context of what goes on the Polish border rather than what goes across the Russian border in terms of the Ukrainians being able to strike Russian air bases. However, I think that needs to take place as well, obviously. So anyway, there you go. NATO is increasing cooperation with Ukraine, particularly to enhance Ukraine's capacity to produce weapons and ammunition independently. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced this at the Defence Industry Forum, emphasising closer cooperation with partners and the creation of a 700-person command in Germany and additional centres in eastern NATO countries. We'd heard this before, rumours about this, but NATO seemed to be playing a big role in training and sorting things out within Germany to facilitate Ukraine's training, repairs of staff, etc., etc. NATO really kind of stepping up. I'm just going to pop into the Guardian. Have got a useful live feed on NATO because that much is taking place at the moment with regard to this summit. German Chancellor here underlined the importance of NATO support for Ukraine. Germany is the largest country in Europe within the NATO alliance. This gives us a very special responsibility, and I can say very clearly here I will fulfill this responsibility. It's really strong rhetoric, and we're going to return to European role within NATO in just a second. This is, sorry, that was John Kirby. Did I say Blinken earlier when I mentioned him? That's John Kirby. Blinken here, now speaking. I'd be interested to see what he has to say. Now, I thought this was interesting. Rustem Umerov, the Ukrainian defense minister, has thanked partners who have made decisions on donating air defense systems. New announcements are coming soon. Air defense is our priority, he wrote. Now, coming soon there, that is actually, I presume, on the back of what has already been announced, which we're going to go on to next. We're going to come to that bit next. Good to see Dick Schoof here, the new Dutch Prime Minister. By the way, England are at war with the Dutch. This will all be over by the end of tonight, but this is officially war, and the weapons of war will be boots and feet and a football. And I'm sorry, but we will prevail. England will prevail. There's nothing you can do. Jeroen, JR, me and you, like, outside now. Let's have this out. Anyway, I digress. We shouldn't be talking about frivolous things like football. Okay, so this was, I think, important to note as well. This came from Joseph Borrell, the EU's foreign policy man. His role is he's being replaced by Kaja Kallas from the Estonian Prime Minister. So he says, I'm happy to have heard a moment ago President Biden say that Russia cannot prevail. For that, we have to increase our industrial capacity, putting more money on the table, more technological development. We did that during the Euro crisis. We did that during the pandemic. It's a really good point, by the way, because I've said previously that, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. Our UK government at the time of the pandemic, just before the pandemic, was saying, because Labour kept saying, you need to spend more on this. And the Conservative government was saying, what, do you think money grows on trees? Money grows on trees. We got no money. And then the pandemic came along and they threw money at the pandemic. And rightly so, there's not a criticism of their action, although they threw money at their cronies and gave contracts to, goodness me, don't get me started on the contracts that our previous government gave away to their mates. At the time, it was outright corruption, and anyway, that's another thing. but there was money, right? And so, where there's a will, there's a way. And interestingly, I watched an interview on Times Radio with the ex MI6 head, I think, of UK, saying people don't realise, and this is aligned to what my thinking has been recently, saying we're in World War III. He said, people don't realise that spending money on this conflict from a UK point of view is more important than spending money on the NHS. That is a massive statement, and most of the country would vehemently disagree with that. I'm of the opinion that is not only correct, but that's a reflection of what people at the top actually understand of the importance of this conflict, and why I keep trying to convince people I know that this is World War III and people aren't taking it seriously enough. And we've had a guy who's in the serious know about military matters saying this is more important than spending money on the NHS. And spending money on the NHS is top of everyone's list of stuff to do in the UK at the moment with the new government. They're like, we want waiting lists down. We want the NHS to have that funding that it's been lacking for so long. When you compare us to other nations, we haven't been investing enough in our NHS, so on and so forth. All correct. But to prioritise defence spending above the NHS is a really big call to say publicly on radio. But anyway, I digress. So I think where there's a will, there's a way. He said, we did that during the Euro crisis. We did that during the pandemic. We will do it again to rebuild our defence. But allow me to remind you that the awakening of Europe, as much needed as it is, should not imply that the US should rest easy. So this is the idea that the EU is waking up, is spending more, is doing stuff. Germany's kicking into action. Lots of other nations are doing more and more, to the point where Europe is paying more into Ukraine and in terms of arms than the US, even though Trump will have you believe otherwise. The truth is the other way. But he says, but of course the US is massively important as the single biggest army in the single biggest spender on defense in the world. Should not imply that the US rest easy. Allow me to say to you that the 6 months spent by Congress to discuss US military support to Ukraine, the yes we do, no we don't, we finally do, has come with a bill in terms of human lives losses. It has come with a bill in terms of weakening the capacity of Ukraine to defend itself. We have to overcome this kind of discussion, all of us on both sides of the Atlantic. We have to join our forces in order to fight against the challenge that Russia represents today, as it was 75 years ago. And this is the idea that, this is not a case, shouldn't be a case of saying you've paid more, you've paid less, but saying, right, we all need to do more and work together. Anyway, let's go back to where I previously was. President Biden announced that the US, Germany, Netherlands, Romania and Italy will provide 5 additional air defense systems to Ukraine in the coming months. The US and partners will also supply Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems, including NASAMS, Hawk, Iris-T SLM, Iris-T SLS, so medium and short range, and Geopol. Okay, so the White House has given out that statement there, trying to work out where all these Patriots are coming from. So the number of Patriot and SAMP-T fire units that will be reportedly committed to Ukraine has been jumping around since earlier this week, says John Ridge. And not at all clear to me how they are tallying these fire units. And yeah, different people saying different things. There's talk about one from Spain that then hasn't been mentioned again, so I'm not really sure. But it appears that Germany, US, Romania have committed, and then we got the SAMP-T as well thrown in there. So Colby Badwar said yesterday, so beyond the 3 Patriot fire units and the SAMP-T that will reportedly be pledged, there are up to 5 more to come this year. 1 Patriot from Spain, fire unit from Spain. It sounds like Swedish joining the Dutch to deliver a composite Patriot fire unit. Unclear who the other donors are. So lots of different claims. Now, some people are still talking about the 8 ones, the PAC-2 Patriot systems from Israel that are still under consideration. There are talks ongoing, I believe, with the US, so fingers crossed that will come to fruition. Jürgen Naudit said, when was it he said this? This was yesterday afternoon. Here's the confirmation again. Biden's great announcements are nothing new except for one Patriot from the US. Biden is just putting on a show that doesn't help Ukraine. The USA, Germany, Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with 5 additional air defense systems, Biden said at the opening to the NATO summit. Also, in the coming months, the US will provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems, as mentioned previously. It's worth noting that 4 out of the 5 of the new systems announced by Biden were already known. Based on this, the announcement refers to the delivery of another new Patriot system, which will be allocated by the US itself and others with a shorter range. President Zelensky thanked before going home, but noted that it was not enough. But there are still things to be announced, and when we go back to what Rustem Umerov said, that more to come soon, I'm hoping that there will be more declarations concerning air defense systems and whatnot, because as the day goes on, certain things are coming out. So, for example, we have heard today that Italy would increase its military aid to Ukraine by 1.7 billion euros in 2025. This aid was part of NATO's 40 billion support package for Ukraine, with half coming from the US and 20 billion from European and NATO countries. And then Italy joined the German-French-led Capability Coalition of Integrated Air and Missile Defense as the 16th member. The Capability Coalition aims to develop a strong, modern and NATO-compatible Ukrainian air defense over the long term. So that's good news. We've also heard that the US has donated impressive-looking Metal Shark speedboats to Ukraine's Sea Guard division of the State Border Service. They're equipped with modern systems of navigation control, automatic fire extinguishing, and video surveillance cameras. I don't know how many of these have gone and whether they are there already. I mean, it looks like this is Black Sea, so I presume they are there. But that's come out over the last 24 hours. And New Zealand, choice, mate. Just absolutely bloody lovely, mate. Look, really like my Kiwi friends over there. I mean, choice, eh? Just really great to see you guys playing a real part in helping Ukraine. Look, really great. New Zealand has allocated I'm always going to do it, $9.8 million aid package to Ukraine, says their Prime Minister. 6.1 in humanitarian aid, 3.6 million in military aid, of which 2.45 million will go to the drone coalition. The rest of the 1.2 million will go to military medical needs. Thank you to our Kiwi friends. Kiev Post writes, actually, before we go to Kiev Post's piece, let's just also say that Zelensky said Zelensky's basically asked for more F-16s. They need more. So we had a decision on 10 to 20 F-16s. Even if there will be 50, it's nothing because they have 300, as in the Russians have 300. We need 128. That's the number he thinks he needs. According to the president, our allies have these numbers. Therefore, until we have 128 aircraft, says Jurgen Naudit, we will not be able to match them in the sky. Russia uses 300 aircraft against Ukraine every day, or at least he's repeating Zelensky. And on top of that, there's an announcement that's just come out that, it's not that one. It's, goodness me, there's so much going on, and I've got some of these in the wrong place. No, okay, I'm going to go back over to here then. So Norway has announced that they are going to deliver 6 F-16s. These are on top of what's already been promised by others. So Norway will donate 6 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine this year, and that came from the Norwegian Prime Minister. So that's really good news. We've also had the French saying that they are currently discussing the training of 24 pilots for the Mirage 2000-5 promised by France. So that will be excellent because, it's all going to help, even though you might argue that there might be a bit of logistical headache, considering there are 2 airframes being introduced at the same time or being trained on. You have to get the logistical footprints and routes sorted out for both of these airframes, but they will give something different than each other to in terms of capabilities to the Ukrainian Air Force. So that's really good news. 24 pilots will be good. I mean, I think they've only got, 6 of these that they are able to give from their own stocks at the moment. And they're hoping that the other nations who operate the Mirage 2000-5 will be able to help out further. Now, the Kyiv Post, in an opinion piece, talks about Ukraine's foreign flying legion that wasn't. There was a talk that this is still possibly open to debate with the Americans. The idea is that you have a lot of F-16 pilots that are trained up around the world that may be retired or moved on, but actually would be able to fly for Ukraine. And there's talk about in the past how you had these foreign flying legions in different war zones and whatnot. Then there's the idea that this has been poo-pooed, that the US would, any kind of American pilot that would do this would lose their citizenship. But then it's being kind of reignited with the US allowing for contractors to go to Ukraine. And so, some people are thinking perhaps this is a doable thing. But I don't know. I mean, I think personally it'd be great. I don't have an issue with it, but I don't know how realistic it is to expect Ukraine to be able to field foreign pilots to fly F-16s for them. Okay. Colby Babois then goes on to talk about these particular ammunition, these shells. Ammunition pieces, what appears to be the first image of a US-produced M483A1 155mm D Pickham. So this is a cluster artillery ammunition in the Ukrainian service. This is potentially very significant. Previous pictures of M483A1s have been produced under license by MKE in Turkey. Until now, US-provided 155D Pickhams have seemingly been the newer M864. This tracks with the Department of Defense's policy of only transferring D Pickhams to Ukraine that meet an arbitrary dud rate standard of 2.35%. In other words, for every 100 rounds that you send up, 2.35 on average will be dud and will not release their cluster submunitions. The vast majority of the US's DPICM inventory, which was supposedly 3 million rounds, is made up of these older M483A1s, which would struggle to meet this 2.35% standard. The DoD themselves, Department of Defense, said that they had hundreds of thousands of rounds that did meet the standard. Even using the most generous interpretation of that statement, it means a superior majority of their DPICM inventory was off the table for Ukraine. If we start seeing more US-produced M483A1s in Ukraine, that could indicate that they have changed the policy to allow for more of the inventory to be available for transfer. In other words, suddenly, if you say, okay, the dub rate can be 5%, so 5 out of every 100 can go dud, and we'll still give them to Ukraine, that means that you've suddenly got maybe over 2 million rounds that you can suddenly give to Ukraine, which makes a heck of a difference. Now, obviously, all the problems with dud munitions notwithstanding. In terms of the hospital that was hit, and I know Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, has been doing a lot of fundraising on behalf of United 24 in terms of this. In just 22 hours, ordinary Ukrainians and Ukrainian businesses collected $6.1 million for the recovery of the children's hospital, which was damaged by the Russian missile attack on July the 8th. No doubt more money now. In terms of personnel, Ukraine's 24th Mechanized Brigade has announced that it's forming a battalion composed of convict volunteers. And just to read what they say, defend Ukraine in the 24th Assault Brigade of the name of King Danilo will be people who were punishing. So this is really dodgy Google Translate. In other words, the convicts. 24th Brigade has been formed as a battalion which will consist of citizens who have been incarcerated in prison, who have expressed a desire to join the Ukrainian defense. This was made possible after the adoption of the law on the introduction of parole and probation exemption from punishment for directly participating in the defense of the country, protection of its independence and territorial integrity, so on and so forth. So this is them announcing. I probably won't read any more of that butchered English. It should be noted that among them there are a lot of patriots who have repeatedly expressed a desire to defend our homeland. There are a lot of people also with combat experience. So it's not just like you're going to get a bunch of unfit prisoners, that don't have any particular skills in. No, there are a lot of people who have had military experience. There are a lot of people who will be willing to put their lives on the line for their country, just the same as there are people like that outside of prison. It's not exclusive to people who are not incarcerated sense of patriotism. And so this is really good news that they need boots on the ground, right? And in the near future, this characteristics battalion, I don't know what the meaning of that word particularly is in this context, will start performing combat missions and show themselves on the battlefield. Good news there. A special volunteer unit called the Ukrainian Legion will be created abroad. According to Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, training will take place in Poland. Ukrainians residing in other countries can join the defense of Ukraine by signing a contract with the armed forces of Ukraine. I don't know how popular that will be, but it certainly gives an option to get Ukrainians who are living presently outside of Ukraine to participate in the defense of Ukraine. It gives them a route there. Christopher Miller reports from the Financial Times that the Russian KH-101 missile that destroyed the children's hospital relies on around 50 Western-designed components, showing Moscow's success at evading sanctions. Indeed, one of the Financial Times infographics there shows that Russia produces almost 8 times more KH-101 missiles than before the full-scale invasion, mostly using Western components. And here, supply chain of 16 Western-made electronics found in the KH-101 missile fired by Russia in January. I found this quite interesting. So the manufacturer headquarters of all of these, 14 of them are in the US, 2 of them in Switzerland. But the listed place of manufacture, China, Malaysia, Taiwan, Philippines, Thailand, and unknown. And you might look at those countries and blame them, but actually that's the US and Switzerland who are responsible for them, and then they're imported via China and Thailand and 2 unknown places there. So those companies making the money off that are American and Swiss companies, although they are outsourcing manufacturing to these other countries, and then they're imported via those other countries. I guess what the question that you want to know is the decision to import those or export those components to Russia. Would that be made here at the top in the US headquarters, in the Swiss headquarters, or would that decision be made down here in the manufacturing facilities so they can make themselves more money? And, interesting there. Or is it not made by them, but made by the importers? It goes around the houses and then it gets imported by a separate company who has got hold of those in a bona fide manner, right? That's not illegal, and it may not even be illegal to get them into Russia because that country is operating within a country that is not beholden to sanctions. I don't know whether like Kyrgyzstan or something like that. So there are lots of ifs and buts and questions to be applied there. We're going to finish on the Admiral Kuznetsov. So there's a rumor that the readiness date for the Russian aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov was shifted to the right by as much as 4 years. So this is their flagship aircraft carrier. So the question you want to ask is I've just asked the internet, how many aircraft carriers does Russia have? Unlike the US, which has 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers currently in service, not all deployed simultaneously, Russia only has 1, and it's not nuclear-powered. And that one appears to be the Admiral Kuznetsov, which was supposed to be one of 2, but the other one was incomplete, built. It wasn't even completed at the breakdown of the Soviet Union. That's back in 1991. And this one, the Admiral Kuznetsov, went in to be repaired in 2018, right? 2018, it is still being repaired right now. And during an in-depth examination of the hull, it suddenly became clear that a lot of things inside were rusted to pieces and needed to be replaced and strengthened. In fact, I wonder whether that is entirely rust on top of there. But there you go. Needed to be replaced and strengthened. From 2024 to 2028, the ship will continue to be at the 35th Ship Repair Plant in Murmansk since October 2017. Repair work. Restoration of technical readiness with individual modernisation work began in 2018. In the repair, so the repair will last more than 10 years without an aircraft carrier. There you go. Quite incredible. Now, the Russian FSB has said it has prevented a terrorist attack on the aircraft carrier This just came out. Two bits of news on this. And not only has it been delayed another 4 years, so it'll be 10 years out of service, but then this. As reported by the agency in March 2024, an officer on the ship corresponded with a member of the Ukrainian security services known as Oleg, who psychologically influenced him, promising departure abroad and reward, as well as threatening criminal responsibility. The officer contacted the FSB and continued their correspondence under their control. Oleg claimed that the operation was allegedly supervised by the head of the main directorate of intelligence of Ukraine of the defense ministry, Kirilo Budanov. In addition, a Russian who had delivered 3 explosive devices to Moscow on an assignment from the alleged Ukrainian intelligence was detained. He admitted that in May 2024 he was recruited by Ukrainian military intelligence to prepare terrorist attacks. So that you can throw that one in there as well. Interesting stuff. And that's where we're going to leave it. We'll just pop and see to see whether there's any new news from the NATO summit. Spain's prime minister stressed a message of solidarity. Spain may or may not be providing another Patriot air defense system. F-16s bring just and lasting peace closer, Zelensky said. Grateful for the countries taking steps to help Ukraine's Air Force get F-16s. Quote, I anticipate that our Air Force capability coalition will be strengthened even further beyond the joining of new participants. F-16s bring just and lasting peace closer, demonstrating that terror must fail everywhere and at any time. Our team continues to work in Washington to reach agreements that are strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities. We'll see what else comes out of the NATO summit as time goes forward. But thanks for watching in the meantime. Take care and speak to you soon.